The voicemail notification was the only sound in the suffocating silence of his penthouse. Julian Vance stared at the empty space where her ridiculous, chipped, world's best friend mug used to be. It was gone. She was gone. For 20 years, Elara Hayes had been his North Star, the only fixed point in his chaotic billionaire life, and for 20 years he had been a blind fool. He'd finally opened his eyes, ready to tell her everything, but all he found was a letter on his desk and a silence that screamed her name. He was too late. Julian Vance didn't just live, he conquered. At 34, his name was etched onto skyscrapers. His company, Vance Dynamics, dictated the flow of global markets, and his face was a permanent fixture on the covers of Forbes and Fortune. He was a man who understood algorithms, hostile takeovers, and the precise, cold logic of a 9-figure deal. What he did not understand, not really, was people. Except for Elara. Elara Hayes was the quiet algorithm that ran in the background of his life, ensuring he didn't crash. She was the one who remembered his mother's birthday. She was the one who could walk into his glass-walled office, past his terrified but respectful assistant Clara, and place a cup of black coffee on his desk without a word, knowing he'd skipped lunch again. They'd been best friends since freshman year of college, long before the Billionaire label. He was just Julian, the intense computer science major, and she was Eli, the art history student who argued with him about data versus beauty. Their friendship was forged in late-night study sessions, cheap pizza, and a shared, unspoken understanding. Now their lives were different. Elara ran a small, struggling but critically acclaimed art gallery in downtown New York. Julian ran, well, everything else. "You're staring again, Eli," Julian murmured, not looking up from his phone. They were at their weekly standing non-meeting, a Friday breakfast at a tiny diner he'd had to buy out just to ensure their privacy. Elara blinked, a blush creeping up her neck. She'd been tracing the stress lines around his eyes. "You look exhausted, Julian. Did you even sleep?" "Sleep is an inefficient data transfer," he quipped, finally pocketing the device. He gave her his full attention, and as always it felt like the sun coming out. "Now tell me, did David Chen ever sign the consignment papers for his new exhibit?" She nodded. "He did. Thanks to you." "I didn't do anything. You casually mentioned his work to the curator of the MoMA at that charity gala. Don't lie, Julian. Your fingerprints are all over it." "I just nudge things," he said with a small smile. "You're the one who makes them happen. You're the constant, Eli. You know that, right? The only real thing in this entire city." Elara's heart did a familiar, painful squeeze. A constant. A thing. Not the woman he loved. Not the woman he could love. For 12 years, she had been silently, hopelessly in love with her best friend. She had watched him date a parade of supermodels, actresses and heiresses, all of whom looked at him like a prize to be won. None of them saw him. None of them knew he was terrified of thunderstorms, or that he hummed 80s pop songs when he was coding. But this time it was different. This time it was serious. Her name was Isabella Sinclair. Isabella was not a model or an actress. She was an heiress to a rival corporate dynasty, Sinclair Consolidated. Their relationship wasn't a romance, it was a merger. She was beautiful, sharp, and carved from ice. She looked at Julian not as a man, but as an equal in power, and she approved. "Speaking of which," Julian said, his tone shifting, becoming the CEO, "Isabella's hosting an engagement party, end of the month, at the penthouse." Elara felt the coffee turn to acid in her stomach. "Oh, wow, that's fast. No point in waiting. The markets like the stability. The board is thrilled." "And you?" Elara asked, her voice smaller than she intended. "Are you thrilled, Julian?" Julian paused. He looked out the diner window, his expression unreadable. "Isabella is a perfect partner. She understands the demands of my world. She doesn't need me to be anything other than what I am. It's logical. Logical." Elara wanted to scream. Love wasn't logical. Love was messy and painful, and showing up with soup when he had the flu, and knowing his coffee order by heart. "Well," she said, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. "Congratulations." "Thanks, Eli." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. His touch was warm, familiar, and utterly platonic. It was agonizing. "In fact, I was hoping you could help. Isabella is handling the major logistics, but you know me. I wanted to have some heart. I need you to, run interference. Make sure it doesn't feel like a corporate takeover." She stared at their hands. He was asking her to plan the celebration of his marriage to another woman. Because she was his constant. "Of course, Julian," Elara whispered, pulling her hand back. "What are best friends for?" The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. Elara's gallery, perspective, which usually felt like her sanctuary, now felt like a holding cell. She spent her days coordinating with vendors for Julian's party, and her nights staring at the ceiling, her chest hollow. Her meetings with Isabella were exercises in polite, venomous warfare. "The peonies, Elara," Isabella said, not looking up from her tablet. They were in Julian's cavernous, sterile white penthouse, which overlooked Central Park. "They are far too pink. It suggests a childishness, don't you think? We'll go with white orchids." "Only white?" "Julian always said he liked peonies," Elara offered weakly. "He said they reminded him of his mother's garden." Isabella finally looked at her. Her eyes were a pale Arctic blue. "Julian isn't marrying his mother, dear. He's solidifying an empire. This party is the first press release. It needs to reflect strength, not sentiment." She smiled, a thin, sharp expression. "But thank you for your input. It's so quaint. That's why Julian keeps you around, isn't it? For the quaint?" Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. Elara realized Isabella didn't see her as a romantic rival. That would imply Elara was even on her level. No. Isabella saw her as the hired help, a sentimental pet Julian hadn't yet had the heart to put down. The only bright spot in the entire process was Mark. Mark Peterson was the head chef for the catering company Isabella had hired, and Elara had vetoed, only to be overruled. He had a kind, crinkled smile, and flour was permanently dusted on his black chef's jacket. He'd found Elara in the pantry, blinking back furious tears after Isabella had dismissed her arrangement of photographs, pictures of Julian growing up, as clutter. "Tough crowd?" Mark asked, offering her a perfectly crafted miniature quiche. Elara laughed, a watery broken sound. "You have no idea." "Oh, I think I do," he said, leaning against the shelf. "I've catered for Isabella Sinclair before. She once sent back a $2,000 wheel of Parmesan because she didn't like its energy." Elara snorted, the laugh turning real. "Its energy? Some things are too powerful, I guess." He grinned. "I'm Mark." "Elara." "The best friend, I've heard," he said, but his tone was gentle, not mocking. "Look, I saw those photos. They were great. He was a dorky kid." "He really was," she whispered, a genuine smile touching her lips. "She's making a mistake not using them," Mark said, his eyes serious. "A party isn't for the press. It's for the people. You were trying to show them him." He tapped the side of his head. "You get it. She doesn't." For the first time in weeks, Elara felt seen. The night of the party arrived. Elara wore a simple, elegant dark green dress, the colour Julian always said brought out her eyes. It felt like a small, sad act of defiance. The penthouse was unrecognisable. It was filled with white orchids, ice sculptures, and a string quartet playing something cold and complex. It was, as Isabella intended, a press release. She watched Julian move through the room, a king in his court. He was flawless in a custom Tom Ford suit, with Isabella a glittering, diamond-encrusted statue by his side. He finally spotted Elara by the terrace door, nursing a glass of champagne, his face lit up with that real, unguarded smile that she so rarely saw anymore. "Eli, there you are!" He strode over, pulling her into a one-armed hug. He smelled like expensive cologne and power. "It looks incredible. This is all you. I knew you'd save it." "Isabella did most of the work," Elara said, her voice tight. "Nah," he dismissed. "She handled the guest list. You gave it this." He gestured vaguely. "It feels right." Elara wanted to cry. It felt wrong. It was cold, sterile, and had none of him in it. He was so busy, so blinded by the logic of his merger, that he couldn't even see his own party. Later she slipped onto the terrace for air. The New York skyline glittered, but it felt distant. She heard voices from the other side of a large, potted plant, Julian and Isabella. "A bit much, don't you think?" Isabella's sharp voice cut through the night. "What do you mean?" "It was a toast. Mr. Harrison has known me for years." "He was rambling, Julian. And frankly, bringing up your time at college makes you sound new." "We are not new. It's just part of my story, Isa. It's a part we need to phase out, just like your little project." Elara's stomach clenched. She knew what was coming. "Don't call her that." Julian's voice was low. "Elara is not a project. She's my best friend." "Oh, Julian, please." Isabella sighed, a sound of profound boredom. "She's your mascot, your security blanket. It was cute when you were building the company, but it's becoming unprofessional. People talk. They wonder why this little gallery curator is always hovering. It makes you look weak, like you need a crutch." Elara held her breath, praying for Julian to defend her, to tell Isabella where to go. There was a long silence. The wind whistled 1,000 feet above the city. "She's family, Isa," Julian finally said, but his voice was tired, defeated. "She's just Elara. She's harmless. She's not part of the business. She's separate. Don't worry about her. Harmless, just Elara. Not a threat, not a woman, not even a person, really. Just a thing, a security blanket, a crutch, and he hadn't even denied it. He just dismissed her." Elara didn't realize she was crying until a warm hand touched her arm. It was Mark. He was holding a plate with a single, perfect chocolate-covered strawberry. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her, his eyes full of a sad understanding she'd never once received from Julian. She took the strawberry, her hand shaking. That was it. The last thread of hope, which she hadn't even known she was still clinging to, finally snapped. The week after the party, Elara Hayes ceased to exist. At least for Julian. She didn't answer his calls, which went from cheerful, "Eli, breakfast, my treat," to confused, "Are you getting these? Call me," to annoyed, "Elara, I need the final invoices for the caterer. This is unprofessional." She didn't answer his texts. She didn't show up at the diner. For Elara, it was a week of painful, necessary amputation. Every missed call from him was a fresh cut, but it was a cut that severed a limb that had been slowly dying for 12 years. She had walked home from the party that night, ignoring Mark's offer of a ride. She needed the cold 3 a.m. air to clear her head. harmless. Just Elara. She had let herself into her small, bright apartment, the apartment Julian had helped her secure a loan for, and looked at her life. It was filled with him. The bookshelf he'd built, the abstract painting he'd bought from her first ever show, long before he was rich, the framed photo on her nightstand, the two of them, 20 years old, covered in mud after a rain-soaked football game, him with his arm slung over her shoulder, both of them laughing. She had loved him for so long, it had become part of her personality. She had structured her life, her gallery, her home, around being available for him. She was the anchor, the constant. But an anchor doesn't get to move, it just holds the ship, and the ship gets to sail away. Isabella wasn't the problem. Isabella was just a symptom. Julian was the problem. His blindness, his casual, devastating dismissal of her. On Monday, she'd gone to her gallery and called an emergency meeting with her 2 staff members. On Tuesday, she'd had a video call with a collective in Portland, Oregon, one that had been trying to poach her for months. On Wednesday, she'd signed a contract. They wanted her to run their entire West Coast operation. It was a massive step up. It was terrifying. It was exactly what she needed. On Thursday, she met Mark for coffee. "So," he said, handing her a latte, "you're running away." "I'm not running," Elara said, bristling. "I'm accepting a better offer. In Portland, 3,000 miles away. Right after your best friend's engagement party. That's not running. It's strategic relocation," she tried. Mark just smiled, that same kind, knowing smile. "Elara, it's okay. Sometimes you have to run to save your own life." He leaned forward. "My question is, what about us?" Elara looked at him, truly looked at him. He was handsome, in a rugged, gentle way. He was kind. He saw her. He wasn't complicated by billions of dollars and a fiancé carved from marble. "Mark, I'm a mess," she whispered. "My heart is... it's a structural write-off." "I'm a patient guy," he said, "and I'm a good cook. And as it happens, my cousin owns a restaurant in Portland that's been looking for a new executive chef." Elara's eyes widened. You're not serious." "I'm very serious. I don't like my energy being criticized." He grinned. "And I really, really like you. I'm not Julian, Elara. I won't be blind. Just think about it. No pressure. I'm just putting my data out there." The casual use of Julian's language, but with so much more warmth, almost broke her again. On Friday, 1 week after the party, she packed. She sold her gallery to her assistant, who would keep its spirit alive. She packed her clothes, her books, and her art supplies. She took the framed photo of her and Julian from her nightstand, looked at it for a long, agonizing minute, and then gently placed it in a box. She couldn't throw it away, but she couldn't look at it either. Her final stop was Julian's penthouse. She still had a key. She let herself in, her heart pounding. The apartment was silent, cold. All the white orchids were gone, replaced with nothing. She walked to his massive, sleek desk. She pulled out a single sheet of her own personal stationery, thick, cream-colored paper. Her hand was shaking. What could she say? "I'm leaving because you broke my heart. I'm leaving because I love you?" No. He wouldn't understand that. He'd see it as emotional, illogical. She had to speak his language. She wrote, "Julian, you've always called me your constant, your anchor. But the thing about an anchor is that it's designed to be left behind on the seabed when the ship decides to sail. You are sailing, and I am so happy for you. But I can't be your anchor anymore. I'm not just Elara. I'm not a security blanket. I'm a person. and I need to build a life of my own, one that isn't just an extension of yours. I've taken a position in Portland. It's a huge opportunity. I'm leaving tonight. Please don't try to find me. Don't nudge this. This is my decision. I need to do this for me. Be happy, Julian. Truly. Goodbye, Elara. She folded it. On the corner of his desk sat the ridiculous, chipped, world's best friend mug she'd given him as a joke 10 years ago. He still used it every single morning. She picked it up. This, she couldn't leave. It was a lie. She tucked it into her purse. She placed the letter in the exact center of his desk. She took a key to the penthouse off her keyring and laid it gently on top of the envelope. Then she walked out. She didn't look back. The door clicked shut with a terrible, final sound. Julian Vance returned from a 3-day hostile negotiation in Tokyo to an apartment that was, for the first time, exactly as he'd left it. Usually, Elara would have been there. She'd have known his flight, stocked his fridge with real food, and left a post-it note on his monitor. Don't forget to call your mother, you heathen. But there was no post-it. The fridge was empty, save for a bottle of alkaline water Isabella had left, and his mug was gone. He frowned, looking at the clean spot on his coffee maker. "Clara!" he yelled, forgetting his assistant wasn't there. He ran a hand through his hair, irritated. Where was Elara? She knew he had this trip. Then he saw the envelope on his desk. He recognized her elegant, artistic script immediately. He tore it open, a strange dread coiling in his stomach. He read it. Once. Twice. A third time. It didn't make sense. Portland. What opportunity? He muttered. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over her contact. Please don't try to find me. He ignored it. He called. The number you have dialed has been disconnected. A cold, sharp shock went through him. Disconnected? Not sent to voicemail. Disconnected. He immediately called his head of security, a man named Thomas. I need you to find Elara Hayes. Find out where she is. Now. Sir. Now, Thomas. He paced the penthouse, the letter clenched in his fist. I'm not just Elara. I'm not a security blanket. He stopped. Where had he heard that? His blood ran cold. The terrace, the party, Isabella. Your security blanket. It makes you look weak. Just Elara. Harmless. Elara had been on the terrace. She had heard. No, he whispered. No. She would have known I didn't mean. She would have known I was just handling Isabella. But even as he thought it, he knew it was a lie. He had dismissed her. He had used her loyalty as a shield, and in doing so, he had run her through. The secure line on his desk buzzed. It was Thomas. Mr. Vance, we have a problem. What is it? Did she fly to Portland? Which flight? We can't confirm any flights under her name, sir, or trains, or car rentals. What are you saying? Julian snapped, his patience gone. Sir, as far as we can tell, Miss Hayes has vanished. Her social security number hasn't been used. Her credit cards are inactive. Her gallery was sold 2 days ago in a private, all-cash deal. She's gone. The word gone hit Julian like a physical blow. He wasn't a man who panicked. He was a man who solved. But this was an equation he couldn't see. Find her, he ordered, his voice dangerously quiet. I don't care what it costs. I want a team on this. I want to know where she is. He hung up and stared at the empty space where his mug should have been. The silence of the penthouse was deafening. For the first time, Julian realized his high-tech, billion-dollar home wasn't just quiet. It was empty. The next few weeks, Julian was a ghost. He was present in his board meetings, his voice sharper, his decisions more brutal than ever. He eviscerated a competitor, finalized the Sinclair merger details, and barely slept. But the entire time, The algorithm in the back of his head, the one that used to be dedicated to Elara, was running a frantic, looping error code. Not found. Not found. Not found. Isabella moved more of her things into the penthouse, seemingly thrilled to have Elara out of the picture. "Isn't this better, darling?" she murmured one night, running a manicured nail down his chest. "No more. Distractions. Just us. Just power." Julian looked at her. He really looked at her. He saw the cold calculation. He saw the triumph in her eyes. She hadn't just been annoyed by Elara. She had hated her. "What did you say to her, Isabella?" he asked, his voice flat. "Whatever do you mean? At the party? Or after? What did you say to Elara?" Isabella sat up, her silk robe falling open. "I simply pointed out the obvious, Julian, that her little girl crush on you was pathetic, and that her time as your shadow was over. She was dragging you down. You should be thanking me." She finally took the hint and disappeared. Crush? The word felt strange. Elara. A crush on him, he thought back. For 12 years, the way she always knew what he needed, the way her eyes lit up when he really talked to her, the way she'd flinched when he introduced his dates, the green dress at the party. He had been so profoundly, catastrophically stupid. He'd assumed she was like him, that their friendship was the primary, most important bond, and romance was a separate, secondary pursuit. "Get out," he said. Isabella laughed. "What? Don't be dramatic, Julian. The wedding is in 2 months. The contracts are signed. Get out," he roared, standing up. He was a terrifying sight, all his suppressed fury finally unleashed. "The wedding is off. The merger is off. I will spend the next 10 years of my life dismantling your father's company piece by piece if you are not out of this apartment in 10 minutes. She saw he wasn't bluffing. Her face, for the first time, showed genuine shock, quickly followed by a cold, reptilian fury. "You're throwing this all away?" she hissed. "For her, the little brown mouse who ran away? She's worth more than this entire building, Isabella. More than your company and mine combined. And I was too blind to see it. Now get out." She left, slamming the door so hard a priceless vase vibrated on its pedestal. Julian was alone. He had destroyed his engagement, threatened a multi-billion-dollar merger, and alienated his board. And he didn't care. He walked to his desk. He had to find her. He had to tell her. Tell her. "What? I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. I love you." The words felt foreign, but terrifyingly true. He loved her. He hadn't just relied on her. He loved her. It was the core, foundational code of his entire being, and he had been trying to run his life on a corrupted operating system. He slumped into his chair. He looked at the letter, still on his desk. She was already gone. "No," he whispered to the empty room. "I'll find her." Julian Vance, for the first time in his life, was failing. A month had passed since Elara vanished. His private security team, the best in the world, had hit a brick wall. Elara Hayes had liquidated her assets, closed her accounts, and walked out of her apartment with 1 suitcase and a box. She had, effectively, ceased to exist on any traceable grid. "She's using cash, sir," Thomas reported, his face grim. "And she's not using her own name. She had this planned. This was a professional-level disappearance." "Keep looking," Julian ordered. "Check every art collective, every gallery, every art school in the country. She can't hide forever." But he was starting to believe she could. His life, once so structured, was in freefall. The broken engagement with Isabella had become a messy, public war. Isabella, true to her nature, wasn't going quietly. She was leaking strategic information to the press, attacking Vance dynamics on every front. Julian was in damage control 24/7, sleeping in his office, living on the stale coffee he now had to get for himself. He missed Elara with a physical ache. He missed her quiet presence, her stubborn refusal to be impressed by his wealth, her laugh. He missed his best friend. One night, drowning in legal depositions and SEC filings related to the Sinclair fallout, he was desperately searching for an old file on his home server. He typed in a keyword, Project Anchor. It was an old college project folder. He clicked it and a file opened. It wasn't a program. It was a journal entry he'd written his junior year after a brutal fight with his father. Date, April 11th, 2011. Father says I need to find a partner who matches my station. Someone with connections. I hate that. I don't want someone who matches. I want someone who balances. I want someone who's real. Someone who doesn't care about the money, if I ever make any. Someone who will call me an idiot to my face. Someone who listens to that weird indie music and talks about colors like they're flavors. Someone who feels like home. Someone who feels constant. An anchor. Julian stared at the screen. He had written that. He had known, even then. He had described Elara, detail for detail, and then he had named the file Project Anchor. He leaned back, his head spinning. He'd spent the last 12 years building an empire, all while forgetting the entire point. His private line rang. It was Thomas. "Sir, we found something. It's not good." "Where is she?" Julian demanded, sitting bolt upright. "We don't know, but we found out why she left. It wasn't just the party. You need to see this. I'm sending a file to your secure server." A new window popped up. It was an audio file. Source, covert surveillance, Elara Hayes' gallery, perspective. Date, 3 days after the engagement party. Julian's blood chilled. Thomas had bugged her? No, he'd have been pulling surveillance around her. He clicked play. He heard Elara's voice, hesitant. "I don't understand." "What do you mean?" "Financial irregularities." Then, a voice he didn't recognize. Male. Smooth. "I mean, Ms. Hayes, that your largest donor, a shell corporation that traces back to Vance Dynamics, has been, let's say, overly generous. And the IRS is now very, very interested in why a small gallery is receiving such large, untraceable donations. It looks, for all the world, like a classic money laundering scheme." Julian's heart stopped. He had been funding her gallery, anonymously. He'd used a shell company to make sure she never knew. He'd wanted her to succeed, but on her own terms, without feeling like it was a handout. Elara's voice was thin with panic. "Laundering? That's insane. I would never—" "Of course not," the man's voice soothed. "But the paper trail is ugly, and it all leads back to your best friend. Julian Vance. If this gets out, he'll be investigated. The Sinclair merger will collapse. The stock will tank. It will ruin him." What do you want?" Elara whispered. "This investigation is currently private," the man said. "The Sinclairs initiated it. They're thorough. They see you as a liability, a loose end." "Isabella," Elara breathed. "I'm just the messenger. They are prepared to make this go public, unless you're no longer a factor. They want you gone, Ms. Hayes, far away from Julian Vance. They have facilitated a job offer in Portland. You will take it. You will change your name, your number, and you will never, ever contact Julian Vance again. If you do, or if he finds you, this file goes straight to the Wall Street Journal." There was a long, terrible silence. Julian could hear the sound of Elara's ragged breathing. "And if I do this," she finally said, her voice hollow, He'll be safe. You'll drop this fake investigation. Completely, the man said. He'll marry Isabella. The empire will be secure, and he will be safe. From you. The audio file ended. Julian couldn't breathe. He sat in the dark, the city lights blurring through the window. She hadn't just left because he'd hurt her feelings. She had been blackmailed, extorted. She had been threatened with his ruin. She hadn't left him. She had left for him. She had sacrificed her entire life, her home, her friends, her name, to protect him. And Isabella. This wasn't a jealous fiancé. This was a sociopath. She hadn't just pushed Elara out. She had taken a scalpel and surgically, brutally cut her out of his life, using his own secret act of kindness, the anonymous donations, as the weapon. I'm not just Elara. I'm not a security blanket. He looked at her letter, still on his desk, now memorized. It wasn't an angry letter. It was a decoy. It was a performance, written for him, but also for them. She knew they'd be watching. She'd had to write something that sounded like she was leaving on her own to make her disappearance plausible. He finally, truly understood. He had been building a fortress of logic and wealth, and all it had done was make him a target. And Elara, the only thing he truly cared about, had become collateral damage. His grief turned, in an instant, to a cold, diamond-hard rage. He was done failing. He was done being blind. He was done losing. He picked up the phone. Thomas, forget the Sinclair leaks. I want a new team. I want you to find a man. I have his voice. I want to know who he is, who he works for, and where Isabella Sinclair is right now. I'm not fighting a business war anymore. This is finished tonight. 900 miles away, in a rain-soaked, charming neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, Elara Hayes was learning to breathe again. She had a new name, just a slight variation, as her blackmailer had suggested, to make it feel real, a new pixie haircut, and a new job she was, to her surprise, exceptionally good at. Running the West Coast Collective was challenging. It used a part of her brain, the strategic, business-focused part that had always taken a back seat to her role as Julian's friend. She had a small, bright apartment over a bookstore. It smelled like old paper and coffee, and for the first time in her adult life, it contained nothing of Julian's. Mark had kept his word. He'd arrived 2 weeks after she did, having secured the job at his cousin's restaurant. He hadn't pushed. He hadn't pressured. He'd simply shown up at her apartment with a homemade butternut squash soup and a loaf of fresh bread. Just neighbors, he'd said with that easy smile. Feeding the new arrival. It's the Oregon way. Slowly, carefully, they had started to build something. They explored the coast, hiked in the lush green forests, and spent evenings in, him cooking, her sketching. He was the definition of safe. He was kind, consistent, and emotionally present. He looked at her like she was the only person in the room. He was everything Julian was not. She was healing. It was a slow, agonizing process. Some mornings she'd wake up, her hand reaching for her phone to call Julian about a dream she'd had, only for the cold, hard reality to come crashing down. She'd done the right thing. He was safe. She'd seen the news, of course. She couldn't help but look. She had a burner laptop she used at the public library. She'd seen the headlines, "Billionaire Merger of the Year, Vance and Sinclair to wed." And then, weeks later, the shocking reversal. Merger implodes. Julian Vance dumps Ice Queen Isabella. The articles were speculative, vicious. They painted Julian as erratic, unstable. They hinted at a mystery woman. They detailed the stock tumble and Isabella's public, furious retaliation. Elara had read it, her heart pounding in the quiet library. He was supposed to be safe. She had left so he would be stable, but he'd broken the engagement. He'd done the one thing she'd sacrificed everything to prevent. A selfish, terrible part of her had rejoiced. He hadn't married her. But a larger, more terrified part knew this was a disaster. Isabella wouldn't just be angry, she would be vengeful. She would use the information she had. She would ruin him. Elara had forced herself to shut the laptop. She couldn't interfere. Her job was to stay gone. Her reappearance would only confirm Isabella's threats. He was smart. He was Julian. He would fix it. He always did. She threw herself into her work and into Mark. 6 months after her disappearance, Mark took her to the Oregon coast for the weekend. The winter sky was a bruised, dramatic grey, and the ocean was a churning, angry teal. They walked on the black sand beach, bundled in coats. "You're happy here, Eliza?" Mark asked, his voice low against the roar of the surf. "I am," she said, and she was surprised to find she meant it. "It's good. You're good, Mark." He stopped, turning to face her. He took her gloved hands. "I love you, Elara." He'd used her real name. He'd never done that before. She looked up, her heart lurching. I know you're not fully Eliza," he said gently. "I know you're still healing from him, but I'm not him. I'm here, and I love you, all of you. The broken parts, the just Elara parts, and the amazing, brilliant Eliza parts." Tears welled in her eyes, instantly cold in the wind. "Mark, you don't have to say it back," he said quickly. I needed you to know. I'm all in." He kissed her. It was a warm, solid, comforting kiss. It was shelter from the storm. It was safe. She kissed him back, clinging to him, wanting, needing to love him as much as he loved her. She pulled back, resting her forehead against his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was her new life. It wasn't the blazing, all-consuming fire she'd felt for Julian, but that fire had only ever burned her. This was a warm, steady hearth. Julian Vance had dismantled Isabella Sinclair's life with the surgical precision of a demolitions expert. It hadn't taken long. The audio file from Thomas was the key. The man's voice belonged to a disgraced ex-SEC investigator turned private fixer named Arthur Bryant. Bryant, when presented with the recording and the threat of a lifetime in federal prison for extortion, confessed everything. He hadn't just been working for Isabella. He'd been working for her father, Mr. Sinclair. They had seen Elara as a sentimental liability and had manufactured the entire money-laundering threat to remove her, thus hardening Julian for the merger. Julian didn't go to the police. He went to the board. He played the audio for his own board of directors, then for the board of Sinclair Consolidated. The fallout was apocalyptic. Mr. Sinclair was ousted by his own company within 24 hours. Isabella was publicly censured and stripped of her inheritance. Vance Dynamics, regretfully, pulled out of the merger, citing ethical breaches, a corporate-speak atomic bomb. Julian's reputation, far from being ruined, was stronger than ever. He'd been painted as the victim of a corporate honey trap, and his ruthless but ethical response had made his stock soar. He had won. But it was the emptiest victory of his life. He had the confession. He had the proof. He had everything except Elara. Arthur Bryant didn't know where she'd gone. The plan was just to make her run, he'd said. We didn't track her, so Julian was back to square one. He knew why she was gone, but not where. The trail was 6 months cold. He was haunted. He'd walk into his penthouse, now scrubbed of every trace of Isabella. and the silence was an accusation. He poured all his resources, his entire being, into the search. He hired data miners, forensic accountants, and PIs. "She's an art curator," he told his team, pacing his office. "She can't just not be in the art world. Look for new hires, new faces. Look for a woman who matches her description using a new name." Weeks turned into a month. Then, a breakthrough. A junior analyst on his team found a blog post from a small Portland gallery. It praised a new curator from their rival collective, a brilliant but reclusive woman named Elara Hayes, who had an uncanny eye for new talent. The post included a grainy photo. It was her. Her hair was short, but it was her, Eliza. Of course. Julian felt his knees go weak. He was on his private jet within the hour. He landed in Portland in the middle of the worst winter storm the region had seen in a decade. Winds howled, and the rain was a horizontal sheet of ice. "Sir, the roads to the coast are closing," the pilot warned. "That's where this gallery collective is based." "We'll drive as far as we can, and I'll walk the rest," Julian said. He rented a heavy-duty 404 and drove into the teeth of the storm. It was a suicidal, insane drive. The wind slammed the truck, and trees were down everywhere. But he was a man possessed. He finally reached the small, flooded coastal town. The power was out. The streets were deserted. He found the gallery, Currents Collective. It was dark, boarded up against the storm. He found the address for Elara Hayes. It was an apartment above a bookstore. He hammered on the door. No answer. He broke the lock. He didn't care. He ran up the stairs. The apartment was empty. It was neat, clean, and smelled like her. Lavender and turpentine. But she wasn't there. He saw a small notepad by the phone. A simple, scribbled note. "Coast trip. The Anchor Inn. Back Sunday." The Anchor Inn. He ran back to his truck. The inn was 10 miles further up the coast on a precarious, winding cliff road. The road was officially closed. He drove around the barrier. He had to abandon the truck a mile from the inn, where a mudslide had taken out the road. He got out and ran. The wind tore at his $1,000 suit, drenching him in seconds. He was freezing, soaked, and he had never felt more alive. He burst into the small, rustic lobby of the Anchor Inn. A fire roared in the hearth. There were only 2 people in the room, standing by the window, looking out at the monstrous waves. It was her and a man. The man had his arm around her waist. She was leaning her head on his shoulder. They looked content, safe. Julian's heart, which had been pounding with hope, shattered. He was too late. He wasn't just too late because she was gone. He was too late because she had been found by someone else. "Elara," he said. His voice was a broken croak. She froze. She turned slowly, her eyes widening in absolute, terrified disbelief. "Julian." She looked different, stronger, but her eyes were still his. The man, Mark, immediately stepped in front of her, protective. "Who are you? How did you get here?" I had to see you," Julian said, his eyes only on her. He was shaking from the cold, from the shock. "Eli, I know. I know everything." What are you talking about?" she whispered, her hands coming up to her mouth. "Isabella, her father, Arthur Bryant, the blackmail, the threat. I know you didn't leave me. I know you left for me." Elara's face went white. She looked like she was going to faint. "You need to leave," Mark said, his voice hard. "You're not welcome here. She has a new life." "I know," Julian said, his voice breaking. He took a step forward, his eyes pleading with Elara. "And I know I have no right. I have no right to be here. I was a fool, a blind, arrogant, selfish fool. You were the only thing that ever mattered, the only real thing, and I called you a security blanket. I let them do this to you." He was crying now. The great Julian Vance, the titan of industry, was standing in a puddle on a hotel lobby floor, sobbing. "I love you, Elara," he choked out. "I've always loved you. I was just too stupid to call it by its name. I called it friendship. I called it a constant. But it was love. It's always been love, and I am so, so sorry." Elara was crying too. Silent, shocked tears streamed down her face. "Julian, stop," she whispered. "No, I won't." He took another step. "I don't expect you to forgive me, and I don't expect you to come back. I see you're with him. He seems kind. He probably sees you. And God, you deserve that." He looked at Mark. "Thank you for taking care of her." He turned back to Elara. I needed you to know the truth. Isabella is gone. Her father is gone. It's over. You're safe. You don't have to be Eliza anymore. You can be Elara Hayes. You're free." He nodded, a final, ragged gesture. He'd said his piece. He had no other moves to make. He turned to walk back out into the storm. "Julian, wait!" He stopped, his back to her. He heard her move. He heard Mark say, "Elara, don't! He'll destroy you again!" He heard her shaky breath right behind him. "You're an idiot, Julian Vance," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I know," he whispered. "You're a self-absorbed, emotionally stunted workaholic. I know. And you ruined my life." He closed his eyes. "I know." He felt her small, cold hand touch his arm. He turned around. She looked up at him, her eyes a storm of their own, anger and pain and a terrifying, stubborn hope. "You're also my best friend," she whispered. She looked back at Mark, who was watching them, his face a mask of heartbreak. "Mark," she said, "you are the kindest man I have ever met. You saved me. But I'm not. I can't." Mark just nodded, his eyes sad. "I know," he said, echoing Julian's words. "He's your storm. I'm just the harbor. Nobody chooses the harbor." "That's not true," she cried. "It's okay," Mark said. "Go, but Elara, if he ever makes you feel harmless again, you know where to find me." He walked away, heading toward the bar. Elara turned back to Julian. She was shaking. He was shaking. "This isn't a movie, Julian," she said, her voice hard. "You don't just say that, and I fall into your arms. You broke me." "I know," he said, his voice raw. "So let me spend the rest of my life fixing it. Let me prove it. I don't want a merger. I don't want an empire. I just want my mug back." A small, watery laugh escaped her. You're upset about the mug?" "I'm upset about everything," he said, a small, desperate smile on his face. "But the mug is where I started to figure it out." She looked at him for a long, agonizing minute. It was a choice. Safety. Or him. The warm hearth. Or the wildfire. She took one small step forward and buried her face in his cold, wet suit jacket. "You are so high maintenance," she mumbled into his chest. Julian wrapped his arms around her, holding her so tight he was afraid she'd dissolve. He buried his face in her short hair. "I love you, Eli. I love you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Me too," she whispered, and he didn't know if she was saying, "I love you," or "I'm sorry too." Maybe it was both. Outside, the storm raged, but in the small lobby of the Anchor Inn, for the first time in a very long time, the world was finally, perfectly, still. That was the story of Julian and Elara. But their reunion wasn't the end. It was the difficult beginning. Trust isn't rebuilt in a day, and a heart doesn't heal just because the person who broke it says sorry. Their road was long, filled with therapy, hard conversations, and Julian learning to be a partner instead of a CEO. It was messy and real and hard-won. What did you think of Elara's impossible choice? Do you believe someone like Julian can truly change? This is the kind of story that happens every day, hidden behind penthouse doors and quiet goodbyes. If this story moved you, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who appreciates real drama, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the complicated, messy truth of the human heart. Thank you for listening.